Have you ever heard the urban legend about that creepy apartment? Let me tell you, it's not just some made-up story to scare people. It's genuinely strange. It all started with a young guy named Jason. He had just broken up with his girlfriend and urgently needed a new place to stay. He was in a bad mood, just wanting to get away from everything and not think about those unhappy memories anymore. So, he found a cheap place, an old apartment building on the edge of the city. At first, everything seemed normal about the apartment, but the weird part was that the landlord insisted on Jason filling out a very detailed tenant form. Not only did he need to provide his ID and emergency contact, but there were also strange questions like, do you have family or friends who visit regularly? And will you be living alone? It made Jason feel uncomfortable, but you know how it is. When you're in a bad mood, you just want to get things over with as quickly as possible. So he filled it out without asking too many questions. The first few days went by peacefully. The apartment was quiet, and while the neighbors weren't too friendly, at least they were polite. But after a while, Jason started noticing strange things. You'd think an old building like that would have plenty of people living in it, right? But he noticed fewer and fewer people around. When he first moved in, he would meet other tenants in the elevator. Some of them were even friendly enough to say hi and recommend good places to eat nearby. But after about a week, he suddenly realized those people seemed to have vanished. At first he thought it was just bad timing that he kept missing them, but then he saw a missing person notice on the bulletin board in the building. It was a photo of a neighbor he was sure he had seen before. The notice said the person had gone missing, and their family was desperate for help. Jason started feeling uneasy. He asked a few of the other neighbors about the missing person, but they all looked confused, like they had no idea who he was talking about. Even stranger, when he showed them the missing person notice, they said, "Are you sure you didn't see it wrong? There's never been anyone like that living here." The feeling of unease stayed with Jason, like there was something hidden in the dark, just waiting to jump out at him. One night while he was sleeping, he was suddenly woken up by a noise in the hallway. It was a light sound, but in the silence of the night, it seemed exceptionally loud. It sounded like several people dragging something heavy down the hallway. Driven by curiosity, Jason got up quietly and peeked through the peephole. What he saw made his blood run cold. There were a few people pushing a large suitcase down the hallway, moving carefully as if afraid to make any noise. The suitcase was too big for regular luggage. It looked more like it could fit a person inside, and one of the people pushing it was the landlord. The landlord's face looked especially sinister under the dim hallway lights, and his smile was as cold as ice. The next day, Jason noticed that the young woman who lived next door had disappeared. It was like she had never been there. Her name was gone from the door and her mailbox was empty. Jason asked other neighbors again, but no one remembered the girl. No one could even describe what she looked like. Jason felt like he was losing his mind. He knew it wasn't his imagination. He remembered her clearly, with her long black hair and dimples when she smiled. Even worse, Jason started feeling isolated. The neighbors who used to greet him now avoided him. In the elevator, people wouldn't even look at him. He also noticed that his friends were losing touch with him. The phone calls stopped coming and messages on social media became less frequent. When he tried to reach out, the responses were always cold and dismissive, like they didn't recognize him anymore. Jason realized he was heading toward the same fate as the missing people. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to get out of there. One night, he made up his mind. He packed a few things and decided to escape through the window. He didn't dare use the front door. He was sure the landlord and those mysterious people would notice. Just as he was about to leave, the landlord suddenly showed up at his door, knocking. The knocks weren't loud, but each one seemed to strike Jason's heart. The landlord smiled and said, "Mr. Jason, did you forget to fill out the moving out paperwork? Before you leave, please complete some forms." Through the crack in the door, Jason saw the landlord's face, and alarms went off in his head. That cold smile sent chills down his spine, and he knew that if he opened the door, there would be no escape. Jason tried to stay calm, forcing a smile and saying, "Oh, right, I'll be there in a moment." But just as the landlord pulled out the paperwork, Jason slammed the door shut and quickly locked all the bolts. His heart was pounding, almost jumping out of his chest. It was late at night, and the cold wind blowing through the half-open window cleared his head. He didn't have time to think. He pushed the window open all the way and carefully climbed out. Below was a dark alley, almost empty except for a flickering streetlight. Jason gritted his teeth and slowly climbed down, with only one thought in his mind: get away from this cursed place. He didn't know how long he had been running. He ran until his legs felt weak and he could barely take another step. Finally, he stopped, gasping for breath. He looked around, making sure no one was following him, and only then did he feel a bit of relief. But the unease didn't go away, like a shadow was still clinging to him in the darkness. A few days later, Jason's friends and family reported him missing, but no one knew where he had gone. It was like he had vanished from the world, like he had never existed. Another missing person notice appeared on the bulletin board, with Jason's name and photo. But strangely, after a few days, the name and face on the notice began to blur, as if some force was slowly erasing his existence. In the end, all that was left was a yellowed piece of paper, and no one mentioned Jason again, like he had never existed. That's the story. So, what do you think happened to Jason? Did he really escape, or did he become just another missing person in that creepy apartment? No one will ever know the answer. Every time I pass by that building, I feel a chill, like there's a pair of eyes watching me from some dark corner. You know, maybe it's best if we just stay away from places like that, right?